Welcome back. Panelists here, Washington Post columnist Eugene Robinson, Danielle Pletka of the American Enterprise Institute, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent and host of Casey DC on MSNBC, Casey Hunt, and New York Times columnist David Brooks, author of the new book, The Second Mountain. I think it's going to take a third, fourth, or fifth mountain if we're ever going to figure out the immigration solution. You wrote about that this week, David, in a way of just like, I felt, I guess it's a version of enough is enough. You know, your Samuel L. Jackson snakes on a plane moment. Can't we? I'm just not sure what conversation I had. That was a very, Kellyanne Conway represented an administration that looks like that wants to do something, wants to do a deal, but her boss doesn't sound like somebody that wants to do a deal.
Yeah, there's a magical fantasy land where we have a president who cares about solving other people's problems. And if we had that president, then we would expand the detention centers. We'd vet the kids in their home countries so they don't have to take the walks.
We'd probably ask mayors to take in some of these folks, right?
We'd fix the release system so they're released in coordination with humanitarian agencies. We do what any mayor and governor would do. There's a problem here, let's fix the problem. But unfortunately, President Trump sees every problem as a chance for his own performative narcissism, as a chance for him to show what a man he is. And so everything becomes not a solution. Everything just becomes a pose, show business. And the upshot is he's tried to deter immigration through cruelty. And that's been a miserable failure, and that's why we have this problem. You
know, Casey, it seems as if, and you always wonder, oh boy, when are the Senate Republicans, are they going to get upset? Are they going to get nervous? But the sacking of basically the entire echelon of the Homeland Security Department, and by the way, look at this. I'm going to put the listing of actings that we have going in this administration right now, and how many of them are actually connected to some form of border security or the border issue, especially what's happening at DHS. Do you get a sense, you know, with Senate Republicans, like when even Mitch McConnell says, oh, we got to have an adult conversation, something's afoot?
Mitch McConnell was, I think, measured at himself, kind of saying, okay, I'm open to this. I think, if anything, that also puts a little bit more heat on Democrats to try to come to the table, or it's designed to. I do think there's an increased amount of nervousness. Clearly, the White House wants to be able to do whatever the president wants to do, regardless of kind of some of the guardrails that Congress has put in place around these questions. I mean, it seems like that's a big part of the reason why the Homeland Security Secretary in particular was sacked. But, you know, I think the absolute root of the problem here is that this president, every time he goes to Congress and says, I want to solve X problem by doing Y thing, whatever Y is changes 5 or 6 times during the course of the negotiation. So, you know, Republicans have learned this lesson several times.
Yeah,
Democrats then had to learn it again, even though Republicans tried to tell them, hey, like, watch out, like, this guy's not really a reliable negotiator.
Right.
So how do you solve this problem if that's the case?
Would you accept any of the deal parameters that Kellyanne Conway laid out today?
Look, you could have that conversation and you could make a deal, but not with Donald Trump. You couldn't. You couldn't with the president who says, "Let's get rid of judges." Let's, you know, as David said, it is performative. It is showing what a tough guy he is. It is not finding solutions to problems. We're a country of 330 million people. Richest, most powerful country on earth. Yes, we can deal with 50,000, people on the border. It's not that big a deal for us to handle that if we choose to handle that and handle it properly. We have laws that provide for asylum. Let's follow the law. Let's build the facilities and put the people in place, and let's get it done.
I'm not sure I agree with you about the fact that we can handle this. I do think this is a genuine crisis, and that's all the more reason why we need to adapt our laws, why we need to update, why we need to move ahead with some of the changes that Kellyanne Conway laid out very normally, I thought. But I want to talk about the president for a second, because I think we reached a turning point in the last week in which, feral marketing reality TV guy Donald Trump actually widened the chasm between himself and proper governance.
Yeah.
In which,
who knew that was possible?
I really was surprised. But when we see this, we see an administration struggling, running to keep up with him to execute the increasingly random things that he's saying. That is also a crisis, in my opinion, because if this gets worse, we are looking at another year and a half of mismanagement, of lack of governance, and of genuine democratic crisis.
Well, here's the other part of it, and this was a part of this that why take away the money from the Central American countries? And of course, I was trying to get it, like, there is no, we have no consistency in our foreign policy, what we're doing in Venezuela, and I mean, there's some political ramifications for Venezuela. It's called Florida's electoral votes.
Indeed. I mean, Chuck, the root of the question, I think, is this about policy or is it about politics? I mean, do they really want to solve this crisis? Because, I mean, I do think, our system has for many years functioned that way. We have solved big problems in the past. We don't have the greatest immediate track record, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't do that. But the trust has broken down because the sense is, I mean, why? That is the best point is, why are you to take that money away when we know that it helps stem the root of the problem? If you're the president, it just indicates to others this is a political thing for him.
Can we not let the Democrats off the hook here on this?
Right?
One?
They need to.
A lot of them are still saying there's no crisis, and then they're strangely mute on what to do. And I think the core problem is they don't know where their base is on immigration.
That's right.
Are we a zero open borders party? Where are we? And they don't want to get on the wrong side of the Twitter mobs. And so it's just lay low, lay low, lay low, or just be abstract.
Eugene?
Well, I don't think it is an open borders position to say that to question the use of the word crisis. Maybe you can use that word, you can not use that word. It's a lot of people who are coming in, but we are able to handle it. It's not hordes and hordes invading in the way that the president describes the caravan. In fact, there's a process, and people get to apply for asylum. We can look at the asylum laws if you want to look at that, but we have laws, and we ought to follow them.
There are 700,000 people coming this year, and they'll wait till 2021 till they get a hearing.
Right. This is a crisis in every sense of the word. You're right. We shouldn't get into semantics about this, but the president gets this is the sanctuary city play. He gets that the Democrats are in a very, very invidious position here.
All right. I hate to do this very fast to you, Casey, but the level of distrust, you talked about it, the level of distrust between congressional Democrats and Bill Barr now. And what does that mean for Mueller this week? Are we going to debate more of what's redacted or more of what we see?
The trust that Democrats have in Bill Barr is basically absolutely nil. And Brian Schatz said in that hearing, what you just told us is going to cause everybody to freak out, and that's not what's going on.
It wasn't wrong, and it did. Everybody freaked out.
And look, I do think there is still a chance that what Bill Barr presents to us will feel as though it is a complete or mostly complete accounting, and he could get some forgiveness from, moderate Democrats, Chris Coons, for example, on the Senate Judiciary Committee. But if it looks like a bunch of, classified material covered in black ink, forget it.
If they redact all the grand jury material,
right,
that would be a huge chunk of the report probably, and that would be a problem.
All right. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.